Morning, everyone. Particularly if you're from the southwest of England, because there's been more news on water again. It's absolutely maddening now. So we've had effectively three things in terms of the continuing collapse of our water industry. The first was a load of dumping caused by a fault, apparently, into Windermere, Lake Windermere, which is it was actually the most famous lake probably in the country. Um, and then we had, we were alerted yesterday, or I was alerted yesterday, to the fact that in parts of the southwest of England, there have been a lot of cases of waterborne diseases found. I'm just going to put it up here. Someone posted this to me. So this is what they've been sent out. You have to boil your tap water now. Now, just a few years ago, our tap water was actually very good quality. So much so that there was talk of, why do people buy bottled water? Why are you buying bottled water? Oh, it's much better quality. It's like, no, it's not. Tap water was shown to be, in many cases, better quality than bottled water. And actually, there was a bit of a thing at the time of people going, oh, what if bottled water's just filled up at the tap? Arguably, that's what you could do to make good quality bottled water, just fill it up at the tap. So now we have this situation where people have to boil their own water because all of the effluents that we've already got around our waterways and, around our beaches, around our rivers, in our lakes, is now in some people's taps. And you think to yourself, first of all, it's like they say on here, right, on this thing, this behind me, and I'm covering some of it up, it does apologize for the inconvenience. But then you think to yourself, is no one actually considering the fact that there are some people for whom the cost of living crisis is so severe that the idea of telling them that they've got to then boil all the water they use for drinking, for brushing their teeth with, there's a symbol for that there, for cooking, costs extra money. What if you've got people, who already are struggling for anything, we've already heard, 2 years ago we were hearing that people at food banks were having to turn down the sort of food that needs a lot of cooking because they couldn't afford the electricity in most cases, or the gas in some cases, to actually cook the food. So then I was thinking yesterday, okay, you can first of all have a bit of a laugh. I initially had a bit of a laugh and said, look, this is like medieval days when you couldn't drink the water, so everyone just basically drank beer. That's what you did. That's what everyone did. They just drank. That's how you got your fluids in. Because if you drank the water, you got cholera and died. So people just drank beer. And someone suggested, oh, what about wine? Can you drink wine? Well, these days you could probably drink wine. At the time, in actual medieval times, the church tended to commandeer most of the actual wine for communion. So it was basically beer you had. But later on, I just thought, what about people who can't afford to do that? What are they? Is there any thought given to those? If people cannot afford the cost of having to boil, are they going to now be having less water? Are they going to become dehydrated? Gary's mentioning there cryptosporidium. Yeah, your spelling's not quite right there, but I know what you mean. It's bugging. Well, that's what's happened here. It's cryptosporidium that's the issue here as well. In fact, it actually says so. So, I'll read it out to you. This is what Southwest Water have sent out. Customers in Alston and Hillhead area of Brixham are advised to boil their drinking water before consuming, following new test results for cryptosporidium. We are issuing this as a precaution following small trace of the organism. They always say that a small trace, we've only found a small trace, just a precaution, nothing to worry about. Yeah, this thing can kill you. I identified overnight and this morning. We are working with public health partners to urgently investigate the source. And I was sort of imagining that meeting with the public health partners, as they described them. And they were just sitting around there. And these public health experts were probably just saying, stop dumping raw sewage. stop dumping raw sewage. And it's and the other one, and this is the picture behind me. So I'm just going to get rid of this. Right. Where is it? There it is. So, and I didn't actually realize this is in the news, but I'd missed it. So I came across a clip on Twitter yesterday of Wes Streeting on LBC. And he was talking about the fact that tomato seeds in the sort of effluence that's been pumped into our rivers and waterways and estuaries and so on is now sprouting on beaches, he said. And I thought, what? Really? And I looked it up, and it's true. These tomatoes here, no one's cultivated those. That's on the Kent coastline. So you've got now so much effluence washing up on our beaches that you've got in some parts of Kent, you've got tomatoes just growing wild because it's just all good fertilizer, isn't it? It's absolutely incredible. Ivan saying that I have to drink plenty of water because of my lithium medication. But this is, I mean, that's the serious point that I just didn't really see mentioned and occurred to me. The extra cost, it's not just the extra time, the fact that you're now going to have to plan the drinking of water and stuff like that. You've got to boil it all. What about people who are thinking that's going to cost a lot of money? I can't afford to do that. Particularly if you've got a largish household, you've got like a couple of parents and 3 kids or something. Johnny Cophead, £5 super chat. Thank you. It says, Phil, drink beer. Is this going to become Labour policy? I say make it compulsory. No, I actually think it'll be Labour policy to clean the water, if I'm honest. If I'm going to be brutally honest, I think Labour's policies are to have clean drinking water again. But it is utterly ridiculous because we often talk about and this is Brexit, by the way, because although we could have had this happen in theory in the EU, immediately we would have been taken to court and the European Court of Justice would be hammering us, right? As has happened in the past. There have been times when we were EU members when our water quality dipped and we were taken to court because the EU have high water standards expectations, right? So this is Brexit. The fact that this has been allowed to take the piss to this level is Brexit. And Alf's actually just said there, wild tomatoes a Brexit benefit ever there was one. Maybe it is, because maybe it's actually a good way to get fresh tomatoes. Probably the only way we can get fresh tomatoes in this country is to trawl Kent's beaches and pick them out of the shit. So maybe that is an actual Brexit benefit. Who knows? But the it's what was that? I've completely forgotten where I was. Yeah. So I like Brexit was supposed. We were always thinking, let's go back to those halcyon days of the 1960s. That's what all those people misty-eyed for the 1960s. And I said at the time, the reason why it was like whatever it was, 70% of elderly people of like the boomer generation that voted for Brexit. It's not because life was better back then. It's because they were better back then. They were young. They were young, fit, healthy, full of hopes and dreams, not sitting in a rocking chair. And you think to yourself that we'd already talked about the fact we seem to have overshot the 60s. We've already gone back to the Victorian times because we're now having the re-emergence of Victorian diseases in this country. But this is going back to medieval times. The fact that you cannot drink the water. This is water. So people in the Southwest, right? They are paying for the water quality. They're paying for their tap water. They're not getting money off their bills, I noticed. They're still having to pay their water rates, but they're not getting the water now. The water that comes out of the tap they have to now sterilize it. And you think to yourself, well, why don't they just go down to the river? Why don't we just go back to the Stone Age, go down to the river with a bucket and bring it back and do it yourself? Absolutely mad. David Falconer, 38 Hong Kong dollars. Thank you very much. Says beer cheaper than water here in Asia. Really? uh, okay. But we've gone back to the medieval times for some people now. You can't even get tap water. Can't even get clean drinking water. So you've got to drink. So these people now. I mean, what do you do if you can't? Anyway, I'm just going around in circles. I just can't. I can't understand how people can just be abandoned to that extent. And it's not even massive news. It's not massive news. That's what I don't get. There will be people in those areas that cannot afford it, and what they're going to do, they're either going to limit the amount of water they use, which is not healthy, or they're going to risk it, and they're just going to go. They're going to read that thing that says, "Oh, it's a what is it? As a precaution." Oh, precaution means it probably won't happen. Then we're just doing it just in case. So they'll just have to risk it. So again, you may end up with people becoming ill, effectively because of poverty, because they think to themselves, "I can't afford to boil the water. I'll just have to chance it." And we may get more poverty-related illness as a result of it. Christopher there saying mead re-emerges as the standard drink. Do you know, I haven't had mead for a long time. I'm not even sure if I like it. Because the only time I've ever had mead was someone made it. They actually made, because they used to brew their own stuff. And I didn't think it was all that great. But then I didn't think his beer was all that great either. So it may have just been that he made crap mead. But there we go. Put water sterilisation tablets in the food parcels. Well, may have to. I mean, that's another thing, actually, in terms of food packages, like food banks. So the news this week is that it's obviously record numbers of parcels being given out, double what it was 5 years ago. I'm going to have to work out the percentage of what it was compared to 2010, because I think it's going to be a zillion percent higher. But it's double what it was 5 years ago, and it was pretty bad 5 years ago. And it's actually quite remarkable we're even able to give out that the likes of the Trussell Group, Trussell Trust, are able to give out the sheer number of parcels, because you would think a lot of the people who donate will be struggling themselves. But there we go. Captain Bart Robertson, I was drinking some lovely mead last week, thanks Cider Farm at Phil. Well, I may have to try some professionally thing then. Vendetta mead is honey. Yes, it is. In fact, the term honey, this is my little fact for today. The term honeymoon was coined because there was a time when you got married, you were supposed to basically drink mead for a month, hence a lunar cycle, drinking mead. So honeymoon comes from that. We don't do that these days. Maybe we should. Adding cheap. Oh, Nick's come up with a science. Adding cheap booze to water may lower the boiling point. Money saving tip. Yeah, that's a good point. I'm not sure we should be encouraging that, although the alcohol will boil away. So maybe that is a good idea. Great British Video Game said in 2010 there were only 3 food banks in the UK. Yeah, that's what I mean, a zillion percent. But I am going to work it out properly at some point. Gallifrey and Ren saying, agreed. I was on food banks for a couple of years, and the generosity in keeping them supplied was incredible. They could even make sure I had enough to eat despite gluten and lactose intolerances. Yeah, it is. I mean, we've got one round here, and this is quite a Tory area, but it just shows the need. It just shows the need for them. I mean, it's and it absolutely winds me up when you've got the likes of Jacob Rees-Mogg going, "Oh, it's brilliant. We've got all these food banks. It's brilliant. It shows people's generosity." It's like, yeah, but the reason for this particular generosity is because the government are failing to do their basic job of government. Water companies still making billions in profits. It's utterly disgusting that, I mean, this is why, Labour have policies on, of course, automatic fines for water companies and, making sure that they monitor properly. I saw Clive Lewis tweeted, he was asking a question about water companies. I don't know why he tweeted. I retweeted it and I instantly stopped retweeting it because it wasn't a very clever thing to retweet. But nonetheless, so he was basically asking about whether the privatized model was still standard, and this guy was saying, well, where it's in public hands, you've also got these discharges as well, and it's like, sure, yeah, but have we got people, for example, and also water moves about. So although we have water, and this is another thing, although we have water companies that are like geographically based, so there's no competition, by the way. So when they talk about, oh, the private sector, it's good because competition makes it better, it's like there is no competition. Your water company is determined by where you live. It's all geographic. But water, of course, flows. So if you have a water company who's dumping raw sewage, it doesn't just affect the water in that region, moves around. And another thing that came up in the news this week. So it was noted that there's been, by water companies, there have been no new reservoirs built since 1989. No new reservoirs. So they're complaining that they can't always deliver enough water. Oh, sorry, leaks, crumbling Victorian infrastructure. And it's like, so they've built no new reservoirs since 1989. You think, okay, that's a long time ago. And then you think to yourself, hang on a minute. What happened in 1989? That's round about the time, and it was 1989, 1990, I can't remember exactly when, but that's round about the time that water companies was privatized, wasn't it? So what that news is basically saying is it's not that there hasn't been a new reservoir built since 1989. It's that private water companies have never, ever built a new reservoir. And it's saying Thames Water so much debt their business model's unsustainable. The whole thing is, I mean, it's been a piss take from start to finish, and really, it's incredible that it's been allowed to get this bad. And Blair's 31 Blair saying that it's not competition, it's monopolies. It is, because there is no competition. You cannot choose to change your water company. You have a water company determined by your postcode. That is all there is to it. And even where it is, like, sometimes you'll think, like with energy, because in theory you can change your energy company, but it still doesn't change anything because it's still the same energy and it's still the same cables. And if it's gas, it's still coming through the same pipes. The infrastructure is still the same. All your electricity comes from the national grid, all of it. It's all the same electricity. So changing the energy company is largely meaningless as well. So they're effectively the same thing. Johnny Copper says, hey, strawberries and cream, not this year. It's going to be tomatoes and shit. Wimbledon won't be the same. But, well, I mean, can the same thing happen with strawberries? Might we find, I mean, you do get wild strawberries anyway, but, might we find wild strawberries on the beaches of Kent as well? Or is it just tomatoes? Clive Lewis said that private water company shareholders invested nothing in infrastructure, borrowed to give them dividend. That is ultimately how it's ended up working, yeah. That is how it's, so when people go, oh, it's more complicated than that. It's like, yeah, I'm sure it is. But nonetheless, the net result is that water companies have been borrowing. That's how they're in debt. There was no debt when they were privatized. They've been borrowing heavily. That's why they're in debt. They haven't been making enough to service those debts. That's why they're in debt. Borrowing. And then if your borrowing generates income, you use some of that income to pay it off, right? So the debt isn't real. But this debt is real because they've basically been borrowing, paying out huge dividends. So although it's not literally borrowing to pay dividends, the net result is that it's done the same thing. So it's all right. People go, oh, it's actually more complicated than that, Phil. It's actually this happened, then this happened, then this happened. Yeah, sure. I absolutely accept that. But the net result is they loaded up a load of debt. They haven't improved anything. There's no better infrastructure. The infrastructure is failing. And we do not have, like, as a country where they keep boasting, like 6th largest economy in the world, we have no basic infrastructure. They're talking at the moment about Donald Tusk was reminding people again in Poland, obviously, that in a few years' time, people in Poland will be earning more than people in Britain, and it's like, but it's not just the rate of pay; the actual living standards are already higher in Poland. I'll put in there to say no, Phil. The strawberries will grow on Skeggy Beach. I'm looking to Blackpool Beach for some watermelon. I wonder what will grow on Scarborough Beach. I'm going to go to Scarborough this summer for something. I've forgotten what now. The borrowed money, which was supposed to be invested in infrastructure, given all to shareholders. As I say, that is the net effect. Yes, that's not the actual mechanism, but that is the net effect. And it's utterly ridiculous to me that anyone can think, given that. See, here's the thing: if you're going to try and argue that, okay, this thing happened, it's all bad, and there's reasons for it, but the privatized model can still work, then at the very least you have to say how you're going to change that privatized model, because the current what is absolutely without doubt, no matter what your political views, the current privatized model is not working. So if you're going to insist that privatization can still work, you have to, at the very, very least, completely change the way it's working. No one's doing that. That suggests to me that the people who believe in privatization sort of don't, because the problems are manifest. They're obvious. You can't be denied. So therefore, what's the plan then? Because that's what gets me. The Rishi Sunak Conservatives keep going, oh, Labour have got no plan. Labour have got no plan. It's like, good one, mate. Where's your plan? Where's your plan to make sure that we have guaranteed clean drinking water, and that the water in rivers, lakes and beaches is clean enough to actually swim in, that we don't have to cancel boat races? Where's your plan for that? They don't have one. And again, the media should be asking that. Where is your plan to clean our water? Because at the moment, the closest thing they've got to a plan is to allow water companies to massively raise water bills again. For what? Oh, then they'll build the infrastructure. Yeah, they said that 30 years ago. They said they were going to improve our infrastructure 30 years ago, and they didn't. They just took the money and run. So if we allow them to just raise and I know it's going to have to happen, by the way. It is going to have to happen, because that investment needs to happen. And it's going to have to, and the money isn't there for it. The money just doesn't exist. It's not there. We can't take it back from the people who've been getting these dividends all that time, because that'd be theft. So the money isn't there. So bills are going to have to go up to pay for it. But what you're going to have to do is to say, but we cannot trust the people who got us into this mess to manage that money. There's a question here about nationalising, I think. Hold on, where's it gone? I've lost it. It disappeared. Oh, damn it. I'll have to see if I can find it again in a minute. Putting it to saying, I used to work with someone who was convinced privatization works because nationalisation is communism. And look what happened in Russia, completely missing out the middle ground between the two extremes. Yeah. Although, even in communist countries, public services, there are communist countries where public services work well. There are other ones where they don't, and they always collapse in the end, because there is ultimately no such thing as communism. Can't exist. Doesn't exist, because and that's my attitude. Communism is actually a lovely idea, but human nature can't. So even in countries where they're officially labeled as communist countries, they're not actually communist countries. They're still capitalist. It's a capitalism that's controlled by an even smaller group of people, the government. So capitalism is a natural part of human psychology, which is why what you have to do is say, the realistic socialism is saying, right, we just need to massively regulate it. We need to accept human nature and massively regulate it. Graham just said, I think communism is a terrible idea. It doesn't account for human twattishness. That is ultimately it. I mean, you look at any communist, communist state. It's not a communist state, is it? Let's be honest. It's not. Karl Marx wouldn't recognize any of them as communism. Jeannie's saying, I advocate withdraw any money to them until sorted. They can then, you can use their profits to pay for it. So if people did it on a large enough scale, that could absolutely be the case. Yes. The problem is you need to do it on a large enough scale, because otherwise, if it's just a few people who do it, they'll just cut your water off. And you will still owe them what you owed them before they cut you off, and they'll take you to court. So it would need to be a mass protest. What you basically need is poll tax riot scale protests against the quality of our water, and then the government would have to take that into account. I say I wasn't defending communism, by the way, just that some people only see extremes as options. Oh yeah, I appreciate what you mean. Yes, because communism is socialism, but socialism is very rarely communism. My history teacher said long ago, communism would work perfectly if everyone would be 1.8 meters tall, blonde, blue eyes, 100 IQ. I mean, the thing is, even then, no, because ultimately the problem is, you need a government, you need someone to, so you then create a hierarchy. So the people who get to decide things will decide things in their own favor. So the end result is you do get some genuine, real believers, but mostly what you end up, it's the same as in any system. Greedy people are motivated to climb the ladder. They still do so. And they make sure that, they get themselves a larger slice of the cake. Then there's the other side of it as well. I mean, even if you have a communist state where you don't have selfishness like that on that level, you have it on a more minor, again, understandable level as well. So if someone's got a job to do and they're going to get the same reward, they just do the job, right? So people will say, well, where's the incentive to go the extra mile to become more productive? And it's like, some people will, because some people will just want to do it anyway. There are people who do extra work, extra productivity without any extra pay. I've worked as a teacher. Teachers do it all the time. There are lots of people who do that. But yes, there will be other people who go, why should I? There will be people who would be capable or have a great idea, but don't run with it because it's like, well, there's no reward for it, so why bother? My first tryst with social-minded behaviour is when I was doing a business studies exercise about gaining resources, and I basically get the best-looking girl in the room to tell everyone to do it. But I mean, the thing is, the other side of it as well, when so you can look at communism, and go, okay, well, this doesn't work with human nature. But then you look at capitalism and say, well, this is the same thing. It's the same thing. Because you can look at communism and go, okay, well, that doesn't work. So therefore we have to have capitalism. It's like, yeah, but you don't, that doesn't mean to say that the other option is the other end of the scale, which is free market capitalism. Because free market capitalism inevitably means that you have, if you look at the last few decades, what is it now? CEOs on average used to earn so many times more, such a percentage more than the workers on the shop floor. And now it's many magnitudes higher. If you look at the rates of pay we're not even talking about the richest people in the world, CEOs, who are obviously very wealthy themselves, but CEOs of large companies, their pay relative to the poorest workers in their company is a much bigger gap than it was in, say, the 1960s and 70s. Right, going back to water specifically then, is this problem also linked to the Brexit benefit of water companies finding it difficult to get water treatment chemicals as they're now in short supply? It is now harder. It's not that the supply is shorter as such, it's that the cost of getting them in Britain is higher. So it does cost more. There is possibly a part of that as well. I've not seen it mentioned too much, but we do have more difficulties getting chemicals into the country that are produced in the EU. That is certainly true. But ultimately, the main problem with the water companies is really because water companies could have just charged higher bills. You know, water companies could just have said, look, these chemicals are now more expensive. We're going to have to put up the bills to compensate, and just basically said to people, sorry, you voted for Brexit. This is the consequence. No. So what's the major cause of what's happening with water companies is it's cheaper for them to dump raw sewage than it is to treat it. And ultimately, they're a profit-making business. Their focus is on their bottom line. Their focus is on profit. So what needs to happen is it needs to be made more expensive. And that's, you know, Labour's policy as it's stated at the moment is make sure that they're ultimate. Don't say to them, oh, yeah, there's certain cases in which we understand there's going to be some discharge. Say to them, we're going to fine you regardless. That's Labour's policies, unless they've changed it on the quiet and I don't know about it. That's the policy that was stated last year. They're going to be fined every time there's first of all, they've got to increase the level of monitoring, because that's the obvious thing. If you're going to get fined for discharges, well, we just won't monitor it. Then no one will know we're discharging. So Labour are also going to fine them if they've not got proper monitoring in place. So they're automatically fined if there's no proper monitoring. And then with the monitoring, if it says there's a discharge, it's like, well, you're going to get fined again. And if the water company tries to say, oh, but we couldn't help it this time, Labour's attitude is, okay, there might be the odd case where a discharge can't be helped, but then you'll only get a few fines, won't you? Instead of being fined every day. So that's the attitude that needs to be taken. It has to be cheaper to treat the water than it is to not treat it. That's what you have to do. If you're going to have a privatized model, that is what I mean by, at the very least, you need to regulate it. And that's part of that regulation. You have to make sure that it is in their commercial interest to do what we want them to do. And also Labour have all, I mean, they've got various policies for water companies that are actually really quite good. For example, holding them legally responsible. So they could be criminal. If water companies were behaving as they are now, in a few years' time, once Labour have actually implemented these, then they'd be going to jail. Some of these directors would be going to jail. Now, obviously, they don't want to go to jail, so they'll basically change their behaviour, and that's how you do it. But anyway, we've run out of time. We've gone over time. There we go. But thanks very much for coming on, everyone, anyway. Have a great day. If you're in the southwest, maybe think about boiling your water before drinking it, and hope that it doesn't spread to the rest of the country. Don't forget to click the like button, of course, and subscribe for further content. And until next time, I'll see you later.